Okay, guys, welcome back to another episode of Rotten Reviews. On this episode, I look at the 2014 movie Transcendence with Johnny Depp. It has a 20% rating on the tomato meter and a 37% audience score. It's rotten. It certainly deserves to be rotten because this film started with a fantastic premise that could have gone in a number of directions and been a great film. It could have been a 3.5, 4-star film. However, it diverts into several directions. It doesn't seem to know what kind of movie it wants to be, and it ends up in the dumpster. Transcendence starts off with a great premise. A dying scientist is uploaded into a computer. He becomes almost a godlike AI being. Then it all goes bad from there. He has terrorists hunting him. Other scientists in league with, I guess, the U.S. government also want to destroy him. They assume he's the bad guy. He kind of acts like the bad guy, and then at the end of the movie, suddenly he's revealed to be a good guy after all. There's an attempt at a love story at the beginning of this movie. Then the movie becomes like perhaps a Terminator style movie showing it appears to show what would be considered the beginnings of Skynet. It really does go in that direction. And then at the end of the movie, it goes back to being a love story again, and it ends like that. And it ends in a way that expects the audience to walk away pondering some great romantic, philosophical thing, as they walk out of the theater. And I'm sure the audience just walked out of the theater very confused because they didn't really know what kind of point they were supposed to take away. It was very strange. There are so many problems with this movie, and yet it had such potential. It had Morgan Freeman in it, for example, but Morgan Freeman almost did nothing. He was wasted. He had nothing to do. He had very little to do with moving the plot forward. He delivered a few lines and made an appearance. It was kind of a complete waste. It was as though they had him on board and then they just completely forgot what to do with him. The best performance out of all the actors is probably Paul Bettany. He does a fantastic job playing a kind of a conflicted scientist character that he's not on board with Johnny Depp's character, and he's kind of like playing the opposite opinion on everything from Johnny Depp's character. And he's the one character that we're introduced to at the beginning of the film, and he's still alive and in the final scene of the film. He does the best job, but again, there isn't much for him to do because he can only do so much with the script. Everybody else kind of just phones it in. They don't do or say anything bad, but they don't deliver any outstanding performances. The script and the direction that this movie tries to go in, it's very strange, and that's what makes this completely rotten. You don't know what message it's trying to deliver because it doesn't deliver one. At one point, you think it's trying to deliver an environmental message, and it doesn't. At another point, you think it's going to deliver, like some kind of more philosophical view on like artificial intelligence, a la, the founding of a Skynet type thing, but it doesn't go there either. And the villain, hero or villain, the movie doesn't make up its mind on whether Johnny Depp is a hero or a villain. It doesn't even ask you to try to figure it out. It just shows him as a hero at some times and a villain at others. There's also a strange part of the movie in which it seems like the movie focuses too much on a minor character, and it almost seems like the original script was changed, and at some point in this minor character was supposed to be a romantic interest for Johnny Depp's wife character, and yet there's a scene where it alludes to that, but then there's nothing in there that shows you that romance. So I think there was a lot more in the original script, and somehow this got changed or chopped up a lot by somebody before the film was actually filmed. That's the impression I get. So anyway, let's go into the audience reviews and try to find out if anybody else has a better take on it than me. Again, I'm going to say this is rotten, so we're going to see in 2019, this has had 5 years to percolate. Let's see if this is, rotten enough to become a cult favorite or not. My guess is not. From 3 days ago, we have a review, 3.5 stars. I found just 2 annoying issues. Terrorists are so unpleasant, you still hate them, even when you discover they had some good reasons. Kate Mara couldn't manage to escape this, and Rebecca Hall, sometimes she isn't very convincing. I'll agree with that. There's a terrorist organization set up to be the bad guys from the beginning. They straight up murder people in their quest to stop the development of artificial intelligence. They're just straight up bad guys at the beginning, and yet later in the movie you're supposed to sympathize with them and their cause. It's very weird like that. The movie can't make up its mind who the good guys and bad guys are. And also, there's this issue in this review with the 3.5 stars. I disagree. If I had to put a star rating on this, I would say 1.5 stars, because this movie just can't seem to make up its mind what it's trying to do. It wastes a lot of time telling me absolutely nothing. So let's move on. 3.5 stars. I don't see what the fuss is about. I thought it was pretty good. Well, yeah, the story is there. There's enough of a story there to be good. If they had just kept this script, but they had done this differently, like they kept the plot, but they had changed the dialogue and some of the stuff that was illogical, and they had done more with Morgan Freeman's character, made him more central to this, gave him a purpose for being in the movie other than just to appear, then yeah, but because the plot itself works and it keeps you watching, but yet it fails in the theme department. It fails to tell you what the point of it all is. And the military stuff is real bad. There's a subplot where the military or the government, they want to like destroy this artificial intelligence that's out in the desert that Johnny Depp's character has built. They want to get rid of it, but instead of actually just flying a drone or sending a cruise missile to take it out, they decide they need to go through this convoluted plot with sending some, like a Delta Force team to side with the terrorists to sneak in and blow it up the old-fashioned way, to really draw it out and do it the hardest way you could possibly imagine. It doesn't make any sense. If the U.S. government wanted to stop your AI factory out in the Mojave Desert, they could just hit it with a bomb or hit it with a cruise missile. It's really simple. They don't need to go through this convoluted mess with terrorists and all this, and they certainly wouldn't need to shut the whole internet down to stop you. They would just bomb you and worry about the rest of it later. So it's illogical, and it really brings this movie down. And there's a really strange focus, while I'm on the military ridiculousness of this, there's a really strange focus on this military unit hauling around what looks like an antiquated artillery piece. They focus on it a lot, and then later, you know, when this military unit wants to blow up Johnny Depp's AI factory out in the desert, they do it by launching mortars and artillery shells against it from a long ways away. Like, what's the purpose of that? It's all underground. All they're doing is blowing up solar panels. It doesn't make any sense. It's completely illogical. But anyway, let's move on. 1 star, a stinker, barely a plot, and long. I didn't notice it was too long, but the plot was very simple. But you know, you couldn't tell if it was trying to be a love story. At times it was, and at other times it was supposed to be a Terminator prequel thriller. It didn't work. 5 stars. Love the film. Everything you want in an AI type future film. You must be watching a different movie. It wasn't this movie. 2 stars. Our protagonist is about to die, and here the other protagonists decide to transfer his intelligence in a computer so that he can continue to live. But it will be discovered that he is no longer the same. The film is very promising, but then lacks originality and emotion, so as to make itself flat and without particular aspirations, making a potentially beautiful film a waste of time. Well, I'll agree this had so much potential. They could have gone in just 1 or 2 or 3 directions, picked that direction, stayed with it. They could have made this work as a love story. They could have made this work as a, you know, a Terminator prequel sort of movie. They could have made it work as a science conspiracy thriller. But they just jumped all over the place. You didn't know what it was. You know, they couldn't make up their mind. And another thing I'll bring up is that Johnny Depp's character, you know, the way he goes into the computer, they gloss over the technology involved. You know, you can do certain things with a movie or any type of story. You can give the audience one improbable thing. and and use that as the driving force of the film, like a what if. Especially in science fiction, you can introduce the audience to a preposterous thing and gloss over it, as long as everything else is explained, as long as everything else is properly logically set up from that one improbable thing. But in this film, they not only gloss over how the technology works as far as uploading Johnny Depp into a computer. They gloss over that, effectively in a sci-fi way, but they also gloss over a lot of other stuff in the film, like how he develops nanobots, how the nanobots all of a sudden they're everywhere and they're in the water. I mean, how did they spread all around the earth in a couple of days? There's a lot of other things just continually glossed over that don't make sense. You can do that once, even in a sci-fi film, but you can't keep doing that before people just have too many questions where they're just seeing plot holes everywhere, and it had a lot of plot holes. Half a star. Oh my word, that was bad. So bad, in fact, that I turned it off 10 minutes before the end. I just couldn't stomach it. Terrible in every respect. 4 stars. I don't know. I liked it. Would watch again. 3.5 stars. I kind of like this movie. I don't understand why the ratings are so low. 3 stars. Sci-fi flick that makes you think at least a little bit. Decent premise and acting. The plot plays out a bit like an old Outer Limits show. We could maybe transfer part of a monkey into a computer. I'm dying, so just beam me up. Oh look, it worked. The movie itself played out more like Ex Machina. The tight relationship between Depp and his wife and Bettany made for an interesting did we do a good or bad thing here sort of film. Although even there, it felt like the director was toying. Yeah, it felt like the director couldn't figure out exactly what he wanted to say. He toyed with different things, but never stuck with something and carried it out. So even at the end of the movie, we're kind of left like, what was the point of all that, right? 2 stars. Yet another CGI masterpiece. I wouldn't call it a masterpiece. It had decent CGI. But again, it reminded me a lot of something that would have worked as a Terminator prequel. It's probably a more effective Terminator prequel than anything else that we've seen. Like you saw a little bit of that with Terminator Salvation, the beginning of that, where the character is being turned or signs up to be turned into some type of AI experiment. This movie actually worked better like that. I wished it would have gone into like a Terminator prequel type of thing. It would have been a fantastic movie. It had the right tone for it until it started diverting into so many other things. And plot holes. There's a terrorist organization, like I said, that's set up to be the big bad terrorist organization. They murder all these people straight up at the beginning of the film. And later in the movie, they just, for some reason, they know not only that Johnny Depp has been uploaded into a computer, but they know where he's located, and they know everything about this, that only, this is something that's only known to the audience and to 2 or 3 characters in the film that are all in one location. But yet suddenly all these terrorists know all this stuff. It's a complete plot hole right from the beginning that I couldn't get around. And I kind of had to overlook that to continue, or I would have shut it off. But there's plot holes in this thing before we even get to anything serious. 5 stars. All I can say is the movie was excellent. Please don't get fooled by these critics saying that this movie or that movie isn't good. Please watch it yourself and be the judge. Don't let your decisions affect these bunch of nonsense critics. They are killing the movie industry. They are not the directors or script writers that will decide what will be the outcome of the movie. You're right. Nobody watching this is deciding the outcome of it. But hey, you're in a different world if you think this movie doesn't have problems. This movie has a lot of problems, not just in the story. In fact, the story isn't bad. It's just like the direction of this film's all over the place. It spans a solid 2 hours of running time, and it doesn't know where it wants to go with this. That's a big problem. Half a star, seriously terrible. My friends literally fell asleep watching it. In hindsight, I wish I had fallen asleep as well, because it would have been more productive than watching this movie. 5 stars. For the commoner who's not a rocket science and wants to watch a good movie, I highly recommend it. I saw it yesterday and I'm just baffled at all these bad reviews. And I'm actually really glad I saw it before I even saw these reviews, because then I wouldn't have watched it. This movie was so awesome and simple to understand and had action too. Overall, really good. Actually, no, it didn't have hardly any action, and the action that was tacked onto it was really cheaply done. It's almost as though they knew they didn't have the budget to put action in, so they did it the cheapest cop-out way they could. That might be why we got the artillery piece firing at the solar panels, and that was supposed to be action. Half a star, Spanish. 3 stars. Peaked briefly when I realized that the main character made himself into a robot god that controlled the world. That kind of makes him the ultimate sociopath. How is his girlfriend going to do better than that? Then it faded. Actually, it kind of went in that direction, showing that, Johnny Depp's scientist was becoming a sociopath. He was clearly out to take over the world. He was up to no good. And then it derailed it all at the end and said, no, turns out he was the good guy and he was just misunderstood the whole time, and people just didn't understand him. What? So, like, they spend most of the movie foreshadowing that he's going to be the villain, showing you in different ways what he's doing is having negative effects, having a reaction from other characters in which they're convinced he's up to no good and he must be destroyed. So you're with this all the way, and then all of a sudden it decides, no, he was just misunderstood. He was trying to help everybody, and he was actually still in love with his wife, and he just wanted to be there with her. What? Like, he couldn't figure out if he was the villain or not? That's bad. 2 stars, a perfect example of kitsch and cheesiness, great visual effect. 3.5 stars. I enjoyed it, found it an interesting concept. Yeah, it was an interesting concept, but it just couldn't make up its mind where to go. 2.5 stars. The best part was when it ended. Actually, the ending wasn't so hot. It had an ending that would have worked if it was like a romance the whole way through, but it veered into so much other stuff in that 2 hours, that it kind of just tried to give us the romantic ending, but it failed because we were still in the Terminator action mode type of movie. Just didn't work. 4.5 stars. I think the reviews of this film are telling as to the intellectual capacity of its audience. It is another far-reaching film that obviously soars over the heads of many casual viewers. The fact that most critics think this is just another sermon against artificial intelligence, and that the ending is just another mundane victory over man over machine, goes to show how ignorant they are. If you got caught up in that version of the narrative, I suggest you watch it again and pay attention to the subtlety. Well, again, I'll disagree. The movie made a point that this was, a big baddie that was an AI, and it went out of its way to show us that. And then, yes, at the end it was revealed he wasn't the bad guy overall. This isn't lost on me or the audience. I don't think it's lost on the audience at all. It's just that these two things don't go together in the same story and be successful and convincing. It doesn't work like that. 1 star. This film tries to present a zeitgeist for the curiosities of the digital frontier, but snuffs it all with a love story an audience can't be bothered to empathize with. A friend and collaborator that goes against his past allegiances. Yeah, Paul Bettany's character, the terrorists that were the bad guys that murdered all these people, that he was well aware of what they did, he just like flipped. They took him hostage, and he even said, well, you're crazy if you think you're going to convince me to your ideology. And then 5 minutes later, he's with them, and they flipped him to their ideology. What? Like, even a comic book doesn't get that lazy. So, yeah, 1 star there. This star-studded cast, and I mean the cast is dense, with minor characters having very recognizable actors in their shoes, fails to actually explore any of the film's real concepts. Like a loose freight train, this movie plows ahead and tries to help us keep up by telling us rather than show. Yeah, there's a lot of exposition delivered in this movie, but that's not, the most important thing I'm getting out of this 1-star review right here is that the minor characters having very recognizable actors in their shoes. Yeah, Morgan Freeman is in here to do nothing except deliver a note to one of the characters and say, you got to run out of this place. What? Like, you presented Morgan Freeman to us in the first like scene of this film, and then he absolutely did nothing except deliver a note at another scene in the film. What was the point of even paying him to be in the film other than to have his name on the marquee so you could get people into the seats? So that would be like what, deception? And people don't like deception, so maybe that offended them when they saw this in the theater. Just a thought. 1 star, how disappointing. They should have done their research better. This was well after the very public poisoning of Alexander Livtenko in 2006 with polonium. Therefore, it makes it very hard from the offset to take this seriously on any level, including philosophical. Yeah, they're talking about a major plot point in which the terrorist organization, they shoot Johnny Depp, but they merely graze him. I mean, he's fine, in the next scene. But it's revealed later that his body is slowly dying from this radioactive poison that they coated the bullet with. It's a very strange, contrived way to kill him. Like, it doesn't seem to have anything to do with moving the plot forward. Why they did this convoluted way of killing him when it just overly complicates the plot, it doesn't make sense. I kind of got that when I first watched it. It's like, again, the original script had more in it, and then they just chopped it up, and that was left in it when they chopped it up into a much simpler script. This is a 2-hour long movie, so it's hard to imagine how long it would have been with this more complicated script. Maybe it would have been 2.5 hours. All I know is there are things in this movie that are overly complicated, and you can tell there was more to it than that, but it just got left on the editing room floor, so to speak. 4 stars. This was not a perfect movie, but I enjoyed the concept and ideas very much so. I think the critics were being a bit too harsh with the reviews. Sure, Depp didn't need much range in this as far as emotion goes, which is why I suppose many were dissatisfied, but you can't deny its watchability. Yeah, it's watchable, but you're left walking away like, what was the point? Now, if you saw this in the theater, you're going to outright be upset that you paid for it. Now, if you watched this, on Netflix, then sure. I mean, if you've got time to waste, sure, watch it. I watched it, right? I'm not mad. But I didn't pay for it directly either. 4.5 stars. Personally, I do not understand the low rating on this film. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I was captivated from start to finish and caught up in the storyline. Whilst it may not be realistic, as many films are not, they are simply made to entertain. I found the concept interesting, creative, and well designed. Brilliant actors, great special effects, and an entertaining watch. I think it really just comes down to personal preference. Yeah, but you've told me nothing about why your personal preference for this movie makes it a 4.5 star movie. This movie wasted a lot of time. It didn't deliver what was promised, and that makes it rotten, okay? 2 stars, bad, but not that bad. I say 1.5 stars, but I guess you could say 2 if there was something special about it for you. 4 stars, don't listen to the critics. Great, heady sci-fi film. No, it doesn't know what it wants to be. We get some sci-fi concepts, but we don't do anything with those. It could have been so much more. If it had gone in any one of 3 directions, it would have been great, but it didn't know where to go. 5 stars, more than a cinematic work of art, a warning about the inevitable rise of AI. Well done. Actually, it's not a warning about the rise of AI, because at the end of this film, they're telling you that, no, actually, he was going to be benevolent, and he was going to basically save us all. We just didn't understand, so we stopped him. So no, it doesn't make that point. 4 stars. I had not given this film much thought upon its release, as it seemed like a typical man versus machine thriller horror flick, but I found this movie to be thought-provoking, especially considering the ending. A review from RogerEbert.com correctly identifies the reason for this film's failure as being wrongly marketed as a thriller rather than a drama. No, it's not just the marketing. This movie actually tries to give you a thriller and then diverts, and then goes back to it and diverts away from it again. It's not just the marketing alone, no. If this had been marketed as a thriller, but yet the love story worked, we wouldn't be saying it was rotten. We would just be saying it's a surprise love story. No, this film didn't know where it wanted to go. 4 stars. It could have been done way better visually, but what it lacks everywhere else, it makes up for in the philosophical aspect. I kept joking along the way that these people clearly never watched Terminator and expected that I would know exactly how it ended, a delusional AI overcome by the humans that created it. And it threw me a curveball that left me thinking a lot for the rest of the evening. I actually enjoy movies with no clear-cut endings, no clear heroes or bad guys, and therefore award it 4 stars. You know, I kind of agree, but then I don't, because the only reason you think that was the intention of the movie is because it worked for you like that. But really, no, that wasn't the intention of the movie. You could kind of read into that, stretch it a bit, that, you know, it was trying to make you feel ambiguous about AI. No, it just couldn't figure out what to say. It clearly wanted to be a prequel to Terminator. It clearly wanted to do that, but then at some point it didn't know how to, it realized it didn't have the action budget to deliver or something, and then it diverted back into a love story again. This is like not a deliberate attempt to create some philosophy at the end. It's not an attempt to rise above the rest. It is simply a failing of the film. 4 stars. The film was good in my opinion. Some parts weren't on the top of their potential, but overall it was a good film. Strongly recommend by me if you like sci-fi. Yeah, no, I'd say no. Sci-fi, it asks a good question, sets you up for it, and then doesn't deliver. No. Just because the premise is good, that's not enough. You have to actually deliver something on that premise. This doesn't do that. Half a star. This movie was completely boring. No, it wasn't completely boring. Um, I don't know. It was boring watching Morgan Freeman be reduced to just delivering a note. But it wasn't just boring overall. No, I watched the whole thing. I just thought it couldn't figure out what type of movie it was. 3 stars. We're in 2017 reviews. An anti-artificial intelligence faction targets people working on artificial intelligence. One of the doctors working on this is hit with a bullet laced with radiation poisoning, and he has weeks to live. Okay, this is a synopsis. You know, the whole premise, the inciting incident of the movie is actually ironic. I mean, they did a good job on that at least. Yes, nothing else in the movie would have happened if it wasn't for these crazy terrorists actually trying to kill off all the scientists working on AI around the country. If they hadn't done that, they wouldn't have created the AI in the first place. So I give it high marks for that. That was an effective device at the beginning of the story. It just didn't take it anywhere, you know. But like as an ironic beginning to this thing, it was great. You know, that they had brought about the very thing that they were murdering people to stop. But you know, it just didn't do anything with it. It diverted into a love story and went back and forth. 5 stars. Amazing movie. Have no idea why this movie was rated poorly. Wow. 5 stars. I am shocked at the bad ratings as I really enjoyed this movie. Better than most of the movies I have seen in a while. It had an actual story, which I appreciated. It had a story. It had like 2 or 3 stories, and it couldn't figure out which one to stick with. Half a star. Huge disappointment, which made me super angry for sitting through the entire film in the theater. I would never rewatch unless I was paid a pretty penny. Yeah, if you saw this in the theater, you're going to be just walking out pissed off. 5 stars. Probably the most realistic movie about AI. No, not really. It glossed over all the hardware involved in creating this AI brain, so to speak. Johnny Depp's character, his experiences were the software that was uploaded into this brain. But it glossed over the brain. But like I said, you can do that once in sci-fi. Give us one premise that's over the top that you hand wave away, and then everything else logically develops from that in an interesting story. But it had a lot of other plot holes too. So, no, that's not effective sci-fi. 3 stars. Christopher Nolan's longtime cinematographer, Wally Pfister, directs his first film, and a very good-looking one indeed. It explores some interesting futurist idea and themes, even though they do seem very far-fetched. Yet, still, they didn't seem they got deep enough into those themes. Still, the very core of the story is a message of love and humanity. Yeah, if this was a first-time director, I had heard that before. I wonder if this was the end of his career as a director, because, yeah, it wasn't. I wouldn't invest more money with him if this was his first outing. 3 stars. Elon Musk should have been hired as a consultant. Well, you know what? I forgot to mention. he does make a cameo in this movie. He is sitting in the crowd, in the audience that is watching Johnny Depp's scientific lecture on AI. He is sitting there in the crowd, so he had something to do with the movie, and I know he's spoken out about how he thinks AI is going to be our worst threat, and etc. His face is there sitting in the crowd, so how involved he was in it, I don't know. 1 star. Greg Smith, founder of Agile Writers of Richmond, Virginia. Scott, it's time to rise above it all and review Transcendence. Yeah, this is like somebody's attempted a review, but they can't make it work in one paragraph, so I'm going to skip it. 5 stars. Another awesome Depp movie as usual. Well, you're way too kind, way too kind. But I know, I don't know how many different posters there are featuring Johnny Depp, movie posters. I'm sure there are enough to cover the walls of your bedroom. Maybe they're covered already. 1/2 star. Please, please, someone put Johnny Depp out of my misery. His performance in this kind of reminds me of Christian Bale as Batman. He kind of does that kind of voice. Not as bad as that, but it brings back a shade of that for me. 2.5 stars. This is a heavy movie. There is little action, mostly just talking heads. The fact that one of the heads is AI doesn't deter to the feeling of the plot being in quicksand without anyone or anything around to help it escape. Depp's aptitude for bringing odd characters to life couldn't help the mire presented here. Will AI be a beneficial to humanity? There must be much more to the topic than was presented here. Oh yeah, this film didn't even get off the ground to take it anywhere. If there was a message in the original script, I'm guessing, this new and improved script that we got here, the final result, the message was completely cut out of it, whatever it was supposed to be. And Johnny Depp, I'll agree with you here. Well, I don't think Johnny Depp actually tried to do anything here. It seemed like Johnny Depp was just playing Johnny Depp. He was too normal to be unusual. Like, he could have been replaced with anybody else because there was nothing specific about his characterization that needed him. He works playing crazy characters in certain things, but here he just wasn't used for anything. He could have just been replaced with any other protagonist character. 5 stars. I don't know why this movie got bad reviews. It's one of the best movies I've ever seen. Really? Are you related to Johnny Depp or one of these actors? Because I don't believe you. 3 stars. Not as bad as critics suggest it is, but should have been a direct-to-TV lower budget movie. Yeah, I'll agree with that. The way this is, if it had a lower budget, yeah, and it had lower budget actors that would take smaller paychecks, yeah, this could have worked as just a straight to Netflix or straight to DVD movie. It would have been more successful probably. 4 stars. To be honest, this is a good movie. The concept of somebody's mind inside a computer is amazing. It's amazing, but we've seen this many, 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 many times before. Lawnmower Man. What else? I lose track of them all. But there's been many where a real person somehow goes into the computer. Depp shines as Dr. Will Castor, an eccentric scientist who gets infected with radiation at a convention. Throughout the whole movie, we are led to believe that Castor is no more, that his humanity has been wiped away by the AI. But in the end, we truly see the brilliance of this movie. Again, this reviewer is giving it too much credit that somehow this was some philosophical message that AI was good. No, it's just the movie couldn't figure out what it was telling you, and you're reading that into it. 4 stars. When we can help but waiting for the fall of all things in earth and what is natural. Okay, they're trying to be poetic. I'm going to move on. 3 stars. Okay, the film is a mess. The script, the rhythm, the characters, they are all out of focus. But the story is really interesting and innovative, and I was delighted by the finale, or by the final. I thought Depp's character was supposed to be the bad guy to take down, but in the end he was truly only trying to save all humans. I didn't expect that, and thanks to this, the movie deserves the 3 stars in my opinion. So you're thinking again that this is some kind of plot twist, but no, it's not set up to be a plot twist. You're just trying to get that out of it to justify that you sat through the whole thing. No, this movie couldn't figure out where it was going. 5 stars. This was a thought-provoking, surprisingly good film. No. 1/2 star. Not English. 4 stars. If critics pan it, I love it. Very thoughtful, provoking idea. Would also work as a TV series. Would love to see this concept go further. Antagonist very annoying. Love when Johnny Depp plays the good guy. Very disappointed by the ending. No, it wouldn't work as a TV series because in this film, it didn't get, very far into it, and already Johnny Depp had proved he was a godlike character. And that's not illogical. Like, they presented it in a way that would be, yeah, you would become like a godlike character with, the intelligence level that Johnny Depp had with this being inside the computer. But how would you make a TV show out of that? Would it be like a Terminator TV show where people are just like trying to defeat Skynet? Because we've seen that before and it didn't work out too well. 4 stars. This is a great movie. Maybe not a masterpiece, but an interesting and compelling story played out by a great cast and wonderful visuals. It might actually have been better as a miniseries. Okay, I'm going to stop right there. Some of the great visuals, the effects, they don't make sense. They're further plot holes. Like, for example, when this military force of the government, this like illogical and ridiculous military force, attacks the solar panels on the top of Johnny Depp's computer center base, whatever it is. Yeah, the solar panels kind of turn into nanite particles that float up into the atmosphere, and they can repair themselves, and the solar panels can heal themselves. The people can heal themselves that are also, have been injected with these nanite particles. We've seen this all before, and it's also illogical because if Johnny Depp was already at the point where he had this godlike power, why was he needing still to be connected to the internet? And why was he wasting his time in this complex healing people? It's completely illogical. Like, you make him into a godlike character, and then it's illogical what this godlike character does. There's so many plot holes here. 1 star. It is not a good movie to watch. 2 stars. Interesting concept. Felt it wasn't well executed. 1.5 stars. An overstuffed, muddled plot and sluggish pacing prevent Transcendence from achieving its ambitions. Yeah, we don't even know what those ambitions were. I don't think the director knew. 5 stars. Superb. The movie is expecting the unexacting. It is to watch like a blind man. Okay, whatever you're saying with your broken English, I disagree. Where you live, this is 5 stars. Where I live, this is barely up to 2 stars. 1.5 stars. 2.5 stars. A movie that really didn't hold me too much. Very forgettable. 3 stars. Was the concept well executed? No. Were there numerous glaring plot holes? Absolutely. Regardless, this movie doesn't deserve nearly as much hate as it's been getting. When you push aside some of the more obnoxious science fiction tropes and campy visual effects, you are left with an overall entertaining movie. I've seen several reviews trying to oversimplify the film as some sort of preachy AI, Gorian, Luddite warning against the dangers of overambition and reliance on technology. This is a lot of words to say that you liked it and you didn't find it a mess. No, it was a mess. It didn't have a special meaning to give to you. It didn't have a meaning. It didn't know if it was a love story or a Terminator prequel or what the hell it was. It didn't even know what Morgan Freeman was there to do. Really, it didn't. He was just there to deliver a note to one of the characters. 3 stars. Before dying from radioactive poisoning, okay, it's a synopsis. I'm not going to read it. 2.5 stars. Quite a horror-starved film, and is left for the imagination to create its own horror-festive plot, such as transforming civilians into nanobot zombies as they march towards the soldiers like The Walking Dead. The ending could have transcendence of a new atom in even space, leaving Earth in a giant Noah's Ark spacecraft with every 2 male and female animal in nanogenetic capsules. Yeah, it could have gone in a lot of directions and done better. It just didn't know where to go. 4.5 stars. Another film that my experience clearly varies from the general public and the critics. Great, but you didn't tell me how. Yeah, most people won't give this 4.5 stars, so you're right about that. It has a 37% on the audience score. It deserves it. I think it deserves the tomato meter. It's rotten. I recommend like watching it if you're absolutely bored and it just pops up the first thing you have on Netflix and you're just so bored of everything else. Otherwise, skip it. This one's completely forgettable, and I will see you on the next episode of Rotten Reviews.